Welcome back to our Simple Healthy Life podcast, where our goal is to have real, insightful conversations on topics that we find interesting. And today, Ryan, I want to revisit stress. I want to do that because I'm feeling a lot of stress recently, and I started to think about how even when you are someone like myself that studies it, learned about it, recognizes it, understands it, when I'm not feeling stress, I'm in a good space and I can give all the advice in the world. When I am feeling stress, even myself, I struggle to recognize it sometimes. My behaviors, my actions, even my words might be out of alignment with who I normally am, my authentic self. And sometimes I even need somebody. Thankfully, I have people in my life that are willing to step up and let me know when that's happening. In a nice way, most of the time, unless I've already angered them because I was out of alignment. But so I figured we'll talk a little bit about stress for people that maybe break it down, talk a little bit about what it really is, what the good, the bad, the ugly, and maybe some opportunities on how to, I don't really like the word manage, but cope with, improve upon, all that stuff.
Okay.
So let's start with what is stress? So stress is defined as the body's response to any physical or mental challenge. I think a lot of people out there don't realize that that's the body. Right, and now we have our physical body, we have our mental body, we have our emotional body, and then some people would say that you have your spiritual body. We can leave that one out for now if you want, or we can talk about it. I actually enjoy talking about that one too. Right. But let's talk a little bit about your physical response to stress.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you have the adrenaline and cortisol response, right? And then you have like so how that works basically is adrenaline is the neuromodulator of like alertness. It's that like fight or flight kind of feeling. It's the activation of the sympathetic, right? And this is where that, I guess, is defined as very energizing. In fact, adrenaline is the thing that is what interacts with our neuron to accept glucose. And once our neurons can accept glucose, then we're more focused, we're more alert, we are more cognitively clear, actually. So we do have regular emissions of adrenaline through the day. So it's kind of interesting. People actually only think of adrenaline as this, like, I get this adrenaline surge and then that's what it's characterized by. There's like movies on it, right? There's a guy like, what is it called? Adrenaline or Crank or I don't know. Jason Statham.
I know. I know what you're talking about, but go on.
Whatever. So, but that was all characterized by like, I need enough adrenaline so that and he does all these like crazy things that are very, like fight or flight response kind of inducing. Yet we do have adrenaline that comes out through natural emissions, and this is actually what gives us mental energy. And we had conversations on dopamine, but interestingly enough, dopamine actually gets converted through a pathway of like 3 or 4 other different neuromodulators, but dopamine gets converted to adrenaline. So when we do things that elicit a higher dopaminergic response and dopamine can hang around for a bit, it's essentially the flour that bakes the cake of adrenaline in some ways. And so that's kind of cool. And these smaller amounts of adrenaline are actually what gives us this kind of like mental clarity. Again, your body uses, your neurons use adrenaline as the kind of almost like a key that opens the gateway of the neuron to accept glucose and utilize blood glucose so that we can actually have the ability to process, to function, to focus, to think, really. And so I think that's kind of cool. But when we think of stress, what we really maybe what we're really focused on is the overabundance, the excessive emission of adrenaline. And that is almost paralyzing in some ways, right?
So let's go. So I didn't know that, but that's really interesting. That adrenaline plays that role in the brain. So let's talk about what happens when you continuously dump that adrenaline into the body and into the brain through what we'll call, just for the heck of it, we'll call long-term stress, right? That stressed feeling that you don't seem to be able to manage appropriately and stays with you for, let's call it the whole day. You wake up in the morning, you know that you have these feelings that are coming up about stress. That's just how you feel. You feel stressed today, right? Well, how many times have people said that to you? I feel stressed today, right? What is that doing to the body?
Yeah, over the long term, it's very interesting because time is what ultimately dictates if stress is actually beneficial or not to us in some ways. And we can get into like, how chronic stress is perceived, or how we perceive events and actions as potentially stressful, and specifically how that damages us over time. But yeah, so you have the same response chronically induced. So work is a stressful environment, say, for whatever reason. Maybe it's mostly perception, maybe it's actually stressful, who knows. But you're getting this chronic kind of release of adrenaline and this chronic release of cortisol, and both of these are going to act in tandem to suppress the immune system, to basically heighten ourselves in a way that, the cascade of stress basically releases ROS, which is like reactive oxygen species. When we were talking about antioxidants, we talked about like oxidative stressors or free radicals, but the process of stress releases that. It releases these damaging compounds. When it's in a short-term kind of thing, like you feel stress from, like an exercise session or cold bath, or we have these kind of conversations, or even just like you have a stressful conversation on a one-off. This for all intents and purposes does release the same free radicals, does release those same ROS, but the emission of those actually tells your body, hey, I have to clean these up, and while I'm cleaning up, I might as well clean up everything, right? It's like, you notice, I don't know, your dog gets all dirty and runs through the house and like clean and drops mud everywhere, sprays mud everywhere. Like, I guess I have to clean this up. And so you go and you clean up all the mud. But, well, while I'm cleaning, I might as well tidy up the living room and the bedrooms. And that's kind of like what happens in the body in response to stress. But normally. But when stress is dysregulated, you have dysregulated, emotions here, then what happens is you don't do any of the cleanup. Your body is unable to constantly clean up and constantly refresh these cascades that release these antioxidants, which are the cleaners. And so, yeah, then this can be quite damaging, especially over a long term. So it really is important for someone to be regulated in some sense and to look for regulation of that. Again, it's not necessarily like solving your emotion, but it's maybe how you perceive your reality, how you perceive your environment, which induces some of these stress responses, because there are top-down mechanisms, meaning that there are ways in which we characterize events and we spin narratives in our mind that then communicate to our physiology on how to respond. I'll give you an example. I've shared this fact before on here, but people who believe they're more likely to have a heart attack are more likely to have a heart attack. People who believe stress is a damaging thing to them, and that it's so bad, and anxiety is so bad, are more likely for those impacts to happen to them. They are more likely to have higher mortality rates in the presence of like a high stress environment. And so there is truth to say that like how we perceive things really does impact our physiology. I mean, this is proven over and over and over and over. And we keep, it fascinates me, you know, the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, you know, these things where, hey, you take a sugar pill and most of your issues are cured. And people seem like they walk around like that's not magic. The mind isn't doing it. It's just placebo. I just healed myself through a sugar pill. That's fake. You know, I want to take the one. Give me the real pill, the one that doesn't improve my symptoms by 20% just on placebo. I want the 21%. I want the data that was stretched just a little bit beyond. It was just interpreted just a little bit different because, you know, it's got a brand name on it.
Right. So if we can think ourselves into stress, which I think is kind of what you're saying a little bit, like the thoughts come in, we spin a narrative, I feel stressed. And then the body responds to it by increasing our heart rate. So let's just say, simple one, and stays increased over the course of the entire day. You know, and then we feel the super fatigue and crash because we're out of our comfort zone as far as our heart's concerned. Is it possible to think ourselves out of stress? Is it possible to say to ourselves, I'm not feeling stressed right now. I'm feeling calm right now. I'm going to intentionally stay calm right now. I don't know the answer. I know that there's tools that we can use that when we start to think this way, we can implement, but is it possible?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's possible in that moment. You know, we're kind of the paradox of change is that we are who we are in each singular moment, but that doesn't mean that we can't change over many moments. And so, as I've mentioned this quote many times, and because it rings around in my head often, is like problems of the mind can't be solved on the level of the mind. So if you are feeling stress in that moment, there's no trick that you can do to not feel stress. I don't think. I think there's, you know, maybe like deep breathing and all that kind of stuff, which physically does. You know this better than I do. Like physically will, you know, release some calming hormones and whatnot. But on the mental level, I don't think that you can actually do anything that's gonna help. But with time, I think you can reframe. You know, I think you can reframe the circumstance, right? And the classic high school athlete example, the one, I mean, you're an athlete, so you know, like you go out right before you get out on the mat there, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling whatever. Those are probably that's probably the language that we would use now, but a teen might use, I'm feeling amped, I'm pumped, I'm ready to go, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt that same
sure.
feeling. Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, and I like this a lot because I feel like there's a lesson here for the audience, right? Is, okay, in the moment when you're feeling this way and the stress comes up, it's at work, it's this thing, it's whatever, right? We do have some physiological responses that we can have, right? We can change the way our respiratory system works. It's a really powerful tool. I mean, literally changing that one thing is it will allow the physiological response that you're after. And so extending your exhale, right? We cut through all the nonsense, cut through the nose, the mouth, the this, the that, doesn't matter, right? Extending your exhale slows down the respiratory system, slows down the body, slows down to the body's stress response, slows down to the fight or flight. But post that, right? So now we get under control, even for a minute or two. It's the reflect and reframe. Right? And I think this is the big piece that people are missing when we talk about stress. If you don't take the time to reflect and reframe, you're going to end up in the same spot again. Or let me put it this way, you're going to end up in the same spot again. Have you taken the time to reflect and reframe? Is this slowly, over many moments, over many times, improving your stress response? So, we give you the tool to handle it in the acute environment, right? Breathe. And now we're giving you the tool to handle it over the long term. Reflect and reframe. So those two pieces really can help you manage acute and chronic stress. Now, there are times when, let's face it, you might need a real change. If you just can't seem to get it, or your job is really that stressful, maybe you need a new one. Maybe you really do have to, do something very stressful for people, put your resume together and go out on the interviewing trail. And, these are things that cause additional stress, right? You got to push through more stress to get rid of the other stress, right? But if you're hearing anything today, once you can get that acute stress under control with just an extended exhale, 5, 7, 10, right? We watch kindergartners do it. We teach them to do it, right? But when we're adults, we're like, nothing works. I can't handle it. And then you stop and you go, okay, I'm going to reflect. That was tough. That was not a good one. I didn't like that one. That was no good. And now reframe. Okay, but it wasn't that bad. I didn't die. Right? And the conversation was really not great. And yeah, I probably said some things I shouldn't have. Okay, I'm going to reframe, start again. We can manage and challenge. We can manage these challenges that we call stress. Now, here's some funny stats for you, because I want to talk a little bit about perception. We perceive, I think, that we're the only people dealing with this type of stuff. Like, I'm the only one that's dealing with my own inner turmoil that's causing me stress. When the person that I'm having this stressful conversation with, they seem totally normal. They don't seem stressed about it at all. It seemed like they were had no problem for them to tell me that I was wrong and that I had all the thing. But that's probably not accurate. So a couple stats just for people out there. They're attributing now 60% of all illness and disease to chronic stress. 73% of people have reported that their work environment, that stress from their work environment has caused them to become ill and miss work. Now, I don't think 73% of jobs out there are that stressful. Like, maybe I'm wrong. No. But we individually perceive it to be that stressful. Is that interesting?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We're going to start to see, and we are already starting to see, new theories on health that I think are much more compelling than what we have previously been fed. And I don't want to get too far into it. We'll save it for another episode. But there are plenty of even nutritional guidelines that are the basis of which we've come to those conclusions. Hey, this is not great and this is good, is just on the shakiest of grounds.
You mean the food pyramid isn't right?
Great example. The shakiest of grounds. That was never the food pyramid, and now it's like called My Plate, actually, and My Plate's a little bit better, but that was not developed in the presence of nutrition professionals, and anyways, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do a big long one on that one shortly when I can sort my thoughts out very clearly on it. But we have all this data that is really lackluster. I mean, you got to think about it, like 1960s, 1970s, a lot of these like research studies coming out, and who are the people running this? What are their interests? I think we have this unique perspective as of 2025 to say, hey, maybe people do fib a little bit. Maybe people have an ego. Maybe science is awesome, but maybe there's also a little stretching.
Funding concerns.
Yeah. Maybe there's other interests. Maybe there's things there. I think it's a very healthy thought, as long as we don't take it too far, right? There's so many good actors too, and that's the thing. There are plenty of good actors. Even in that example, the food pyramid kind of thing, there were plenty of great actors who just had smaller voices than the bad ones. But nonetheless, so so we have these new things you were kind of mentioning, like the 70% of 60 to 70% of disease process being built upon the presence of stress. They're starting to figure out that many metabolic conditions are related to this dysfunction of the mitochondrial cells. And it just so happens that during a chronic stress response, those mitochondrial cells, or they're not cells, the mitochondria in the cells are actually supposed to be managing their antioxidants and free radicals. They're supposed to be releasing these free radicals and then cleaning it up and saying, ooh, okay, we got to repair, we got to regulate ourselves. And in fact, during short bouts of hormetic stress, which we'll get to, these mitochondria will actually upregulate. They'll increase in number, and this improves our metabolic system. And metabolism, not necessarily being calories in, calories out, kind of like, you know, bro science metabolism, more so like the functioning of our body, right? And so when the functioning of our body is not speedy enough or is not efficient enough, then things slow down. Think about it as like, you know, metabolism being this like big, complicated traffic patterns, right, throughout the body. And there are many intersections that need to work just right so that car A can get to point B in a timely, efficient manner. And when the intersections here get kind of bogged down and dysregulated, and the intersections being maybe the mitochondria themselves, when those get messed up, the car is not getting to point B in a timely, efficient manner, and this causes accidents and bogs and all that kind of stuff. So we're starting to figure out that kind of stuff, and I think the stress component is a compelling feature of this process.
I think it's really interesting to me that how far we've lagged behind, right? We kind of started with the nuts and bolts, right? Cut the person open. This is what your heart looks like. Okay, then do the study on the heart. This is how often the heart beats. All right, this is what it needs to work. But now as a society, we're getting into how our perception of reality can cause our physiological response. And I think we went down this as a society, right? We went down the psychology perspective, and we went down the physiological perspective, and now I feel like we're starting to put these two things together, because one of the biggest challenges we have is my perception of stress, or my perception of a stressful interaction, and your perception of a stressful interaction could be any number of different things, right? And you brought up a great example, like about being amped versus being nervous. You know, how many kids do you know are like, everybody out here listening to this podcast knows someone whose kid is super excited for game day and somebody that's super nervous for game day. Everybody out here knows someone that's super excited to take the test and someone that's super nervous. Same test. So then you extrapolate that out over years and years and years, or even, same person doing the same job. You extrapolate that over years and years and years, and you go, oh my God, one of these people died at age 63. And one of these people had a nice long retirement and they lived nice long. How it's only now that we're starting to put together that, wow, one of these people was stressed the whole time they were at work and the other person wasn't, because we don't show it, right? Or maybe we show it a little bit, but it doesn't match how we feel. Am I making sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. I think it's the hardest question in health, right? Because we can't see inside someone's mind. We can't see exactly how they're perceiving their everyday reality, and this is the biggest variable that's just not there in health. I'll be honest with you. It seems in a lot of ways, it seems health is more so this kind of luck thing. There are some things that we can do, like you can move, you can eat somewhat well and whatnot, but that doesn't condemn you to, I suppose condemn is an odd word choice, but yeah, it doesn't lead to the fact that you're going to have a healthy life. It just means that the risk of disease is lower, right, potentially. And then you could have someone who smokes and drinks all day, doesn't eat like anything, eats like crap and doesn't move, and they could live a long, healthy life too, right? Yeah. There's an element there that is just so this variable that is missing. It's like, why is that possible? Why is it possible that there are populations of people that eat only saturated fat and protein and they live long, healthy, disease-free lives, right? Why does that exist? You know, why do these things happen? You would think that there would be some semblance of uniformity there where we would figure it out by now, but we just haven't. And I think the perception piece is a big one. I have this thought, of course, like we use the terminology like fight or flight, and then often they'll throw in freeze there too, because that's another response. So fight, flight, or freeze. I think that from what I've seen, a lot of people who have these like very dysregulated stress response, the people who often their natural choice is flight. And maybe we reframe it just for the conversation here. We reframe it to confront, avoid, or freeze. And so when people are avoiding these feelings, I'm feeling stressed before the game, so I'm just not going to play. I'm just not going to play the game because I don't want to feel that feeling, right? When people go down this pathway for much of their life, I don't want to draw because it's going to be bad and I'm going to feel bad about it. You know, I don't want to play music because it's hard and whatever. Everything in their life they tend to avoid. They avoid these feelings that pop up, these very natural feelings that pop up. But yet the paradox of that is that they're running in circles. They're avoiding in circles. It's like you're running away from a lion, but yet you run so much that, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. And you know, the fight flight, you know, terminology is hard for us to understand because we don't have a lot of fight. Like what are we going to fight, you know? So this is why I really like the language of confront, because we can confront.
I absolutely love that. That just kind of blew my mind. I think that it's so interesting to me. Let's break that down a little bit longer, because that's a super smart point. When I think about fight, flight, or freeze, I think like, well, I don't want to fight, right? That's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight the stress. I'm going to fight I'm going to have the difficult conversation. I'm going to, right? But when I think about confront, avoid, man, I put myself in avoid a lot.
A lot of us do.
I put myself in avoid a lot. And we went back to an earlier podcast we talked about, like, how are you feeling today? Fine. Well, maybe I'm avoiding how I'm really feeling.
Right.
You know, how was work today? Well, maybe I'm avoiding stress, but I'm not. I'm in the stress. I'm still stressed. I'm just avoiding the confrontation that it takes to remove myself from stress.
Right.
And that hit home with me quite a bit. Right. And I bet that hit home for a lot of people out there, because that I've never heard that before. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I see it a lot, right? It's like, you know, obviously I work. For those who don't know, I work a lot with eating disorders, and a lot of they've avoided so much that, again, they've avoided themselves into these highly dysregulated states, and so it's a choice that we often have, and it's a choice that the brain says, all right, well, just get out of here, just flight, right? But we now have such a complex social environment that we can't avoid all the time. And when you see yourself avoiding all the time, it feels good. It feels fine. Like, okay, well, I'm just, you know, I don't want to deal with the hard feeling or the hard conversation. But the problem is you're just pushing the hard till later on. You're like I said, you're running back into the lion that you were once originally running away from. And so when we confront, we face the hard now, yet you even think about it in regards to the lion. You fight the lion, you know, you fight the other tribesmen, or you fight the boar or whatever it is. Well, now the boar is not terrorizing your...
Oh, I thought you said Borg, like Star Trek reference.
No.
It's still cool. It's fine.
I don't know Star Trek very well.
I'm just a nerd.
You fight the Borg.
Yes.
The laser.
You will be assimilated. Okay, I'll stop.
But yeah, then you're not being terrorized by this anymore. And sure, you could fail and you could get hurt and all that kind of stuff, but You know, we don't teach people to confront, and we don't teach people to fight. In fact, we teach the exact opposite. We teach people to suppress themselves. We teach people to avoid the confrontation, and they were probably our personality traits. There definitely are personality trait, characteristics that make someone have a propensity, I suppose, to being more confrontational or less. But all of that is also skill. It's all a skill. It's like we can gain the skill of confronting and recognize, wow, actually, when I choose to fight, pathway, the confrontation pathway, I feel a lot better overall.
So I think I'll tell you what, for the audience out there, I can tell you what I'm going to do with this new information. I'm going to reflect and reframe, and I'm going to choose to journal, because I'm very confident that if I'm being 100% transparent and honest with myself, my journal would say I chose to avoid today. I chose to avoid today, and I'm still feeling stress about it. Whatever it is, this problem that I'm having. I chose to avoid today again, and it's still causing me stress. And I think that bringing awareness to it, bringing light to it through reflection and through journaling will help me, and I imagine many people out there that are like me, choose to confront and allow stress to become acute, which is good for us, and not chronic, which is bad for us. And I think that's at least try that path. Try the acute stress style. Right? Don't blow up and fly off the handle. Right? Use your skills to combat your stressful situation or whatever the challenges that you're having. But choosing to avoid is going to cause this long-term stress, this illness, this sickness, this disease, and it's proven. We prove it over and over and over again. So thank you for today. This was a topic that I wanted to talk about, and this is why I love to talk to you. So thank you. Great stuff.
Of course.
If you guys are interested in any more of this type of stuff, a stress response, all the stuff that we like to talk about, shoot us a line, and we'll be here next time. Thanks.